Hello.
He didn't even look up from his stupid leather notebook, just tapped his pen twice, grunted like some ancient warthog of middle management, and said it, right there in front of the whole team. You're too young to understand policy. I was mid-sentence, had the statute number highlighted, even cross-referenced the new federal language because apparently basic reading comprehension now counts as rebellion. But nope. I got the sweetie, stay in your lane treatment with a side of smug chuckle. I should have kept my mouth shut, I guess. Let the old boys play audit dress up while the real violations stacked up like unpaid parking tickets outside an IRS building. The worst part? The others just nodded, like background dancers in a musical about willful ignorance. Martin, senior director of compliance, self-appointed oracle of gut feelings, slammed the meeting shut with a story about how he once charmed a regulator into rewriting the rules back in '03. That's the culture at Beventech. Follow the dinosaur, even if he's headed off a cliff. I walked out of that conference room, gripping my notes so hard the paper crinkled like a threat. If you're still listening, hey, quick thing. I know 97% of folks who follow these stories don't subscribe. But if this is hitting close to home, if you've ever been dismissed, talked down to, or watched someone fail upward while you hold the real answers, hit that subscribe button. Give the video a like. It seriously helps the team keep telling these stories that don't usually get told. Anyway, my official title was Policy and Regulatory Documentation Associate, which is corporate for please shut up and organize the folders. I didn't shut up. Not really. I just took a different route. I started staying late, not to brown nose, but because I needed the quiet. Needed to see how far the rot went. And, oh, it went deep. We had vendor contracts referencing statutes that were sunsetted 6 years ago. Our data handling policies were based on frameworks 2 federal cycles behind. One clause still referenced fax machine transmissions. And Martin? He'd slap a post-it on a draft and call it approved. I wasn't some intern fumbling through a summer job. I came from a federal fellowship. I'd sat in on oversight committees. I watched agencies fine companies into oblivion for less than what Martin considered legacy methods. And the thing is, he wasn't evil. He was just lazy, arrogant. A man convinced his handshakes were stronger than subpoenas. But those kinds of men only stay untouchable until the audit clock strikes midnight. By week 3, I drafted a full revision of the internal compliance manual. Every outdated clause flagged, every federal update embedded. I linked every policy line to its source statute and made sure even the footnotes had footnotes. I saved it in our revision system, named it Internal Rev Policy E. Alvarez Draft, and time-stamped every change, and then Martin found it. By Monday morning, my name was scrubbed from the metadata. His version, clunky, half-done, still quoting obsolete frameworks, was live in the system. Circulated to leadership, marked as final. I didn't raise hell. I didn't even mention it. But I made one change to my habits that morning. I stopped drinking coffee at my desk, started keeping my flash drive on me at all times. And every email, every file edit, backed up, labeled, archived. Because if Martin was willing to bury my work, I knew damn well he'd try to bury me next. You ever feel the air shift? Like the room's too quiet, not because nothing's happening, but because something already did and nobody's acknowledged it yet? That's what it felt like walking into work the next morning. My inbox was silent. No update notifications from legal, no comments on the draft I'd uploaded the night before, and that draft, it wasn't just some Word doc slapped together over lunch. I'd spent 2 straight weekends building that thing from the ground up. Cross-referenced every clause against the most recent amendments to the Federal Data Integrity Act, incorporated the GAO's 2023 oversight recommendations, even built a compliance appendix with hyperlinks back to every governing statute. Hell, I made a glossary for the acronym challenged. I named the file clearly, Internal Rev Policy.E Alvarez Draft, tagged the date, included a 2-paragraph summary for easy context, uploaded it through the correct channel, Policy System v4, which logs user metadata, timestamp trails, and edit chains. I followed every protocol to a T, and then nothing. I figured maybe Martin was slow to respond, or maybe, God help me, I was being paranoid, so I waited. half a day. Then, around 3:17 p.m., I saw it, a company-wide message from legal titled, "Finalized internal policy, updated for compliance cycle." My stomach dropped before I even opened the damn thing. It was his, Martin's version. Same section headers, same clause order, but stripped clean of the updated citations. He kept some of my phrasing, enough to fool anyone not looking too close. But he removed the embedded statute links. The footnotes were gone. And at the bottom, no author tag, no document history chain, just a stamped final watermark in bold gray Helvetica. He'd taken my work, gutted it, and passed it off as a sanitized version. I checked the internal system logs. His name was listed as the uploader. The version history had been wiped, which meant he'd either exported it offline and re-uploaded, or he'd sweet-talked IT into doing a back-end scrub. Either way, my fingerprints were gone, at least the ones he could see. But here's what he didn't know. I never trusted the internal system. First thing I did when I got hired was set up a shadow archive. Local drive, encrypted mirror folders, every draft I touched, I kept a copy. Every email chain, every comment thread, every revision log, all saved. All backed up, all untouched. So I sat there, hands folded, watching the Slack thread light up with people patting Martin on the back like he'd personally wrestled policy into submission. Great work on getting that out so fast. Thanks for the update, Martin. I didn't reply, didn't react, but I opened a new document on my local drive and titled it M version R5's a draft. Compare. And then I got to work. Side by side, clause by clause. I highlighted every omission, every federal requirement he'd skipped, every risk exposure he'd reintroduced with his shortcutting. I time-stamped the change logs from my original upload, compiled screenshots of my version in the system the night before. I even flagged the discrepancy between document metadata and our compliance submission form, which still showed my user ID as the initial uploader. I didn't plan to use it. Not yet. But I wasn't going to get blindsided again. The sting of being dismissed was still fresh, still burning under my ribs like a pulled muscle you forget about until you twist wrong. That's the thing they never teach you in the fellowships. What to do when someone steals your work and smiles while doing it. So I stopped looking for recognition. I started preparing for war. And I didn't tell a soul. The first ripple hit on a Thursday morning, buried halfway down a routine company-wide memo. The subject line was innocent enough. Policy hygiene and partner oversight review. But those of us fluent in corporate disaster knew the translation. Someone screwed up, and the feds might be coming. The email hinted at increased scrutiny and a randomized compliance sample stemming from external vendor interactions. I read it 3 times, each line tightening something in my chest. This wasn't routine. This was a storm front, and Bevintech was already wet. By noon, Martin's door was closed. First time I'd seen that in 2 months. He called in team leads one by one. Files were flying. Drafts being pulled, renamed, reshuffled. And just like that, my access to certain shared folders vanished. Subtle, not a lockout, just permissions quietly altered. Slack channels I used to monitor suddenly marked private. When I pinged Martin for the clarification, his reply was just one line. Sit tight. This doesn't involve your scope. That's when I knew. They weren't fixing anything. They were building lifeboats, and I wasn't on the manifest. Friday morning, I got confirmation. Not through any formal notice, of course. I was walking past the second-floor printer on the way to refill my coffee when I saw it. A single sheet, face up in the output tray. A team assignment grid for the preliminary audit simulation. My name wasn't there. Not even in the appendices. They'd scrubbed me completely. Even Karen, who once accidentally sent a typo-laden vendor invoice to the wrong branch of the Department of Energy, had a role. But not me. Not the person who'd written the only version of the policy that actually aligned with current law. I didn't say anything. Just kept walking. But I stopped by the IT floor instead of the break room. Back at my desk, I started watching traffic. Who was pulling files, when, and from where. Our internal system didn't log specifics, but if you knew how to cross-reference timestamps with badge swipes and shared drive pings, you could triangulate enough to build a timeline. And what I saw made my stomach lurch. Martin had downloaded my original draft, not his version, mine. The one with the embedded statute links and full audit trail. He accessed it late Wednesday night, just before submitting another document labeled Policy Backfill 2024 Final V2 to Legal. That's when it clicked. He didn't just scrub my name from the records. He was cherry-picking pieces of my work now to retroactively plug into his mess, trying to patch it up just enough to survive a surface-level review. A compliance Frankenstein stitched together from whatever scraps he could find, but sloppy, desperate, and still nowhere near federally clean. Around 3 p.m., I got my first real breadcrumb. Brian from procurement, quiet guy, paranoid about everything, forwarded me a screenshot from a private Slack thread he wasn't even supposed to be in. It was Martin messaging one of the audit prep leads. Martin, if anything leaks, Alvarez is expendable. Keep the trail clean. That word, expendable. I stared at it for a long time, like it was written in blood and every letter pulsed. I didn't reply, just archived the message, exported the image, saved it to 2 separate encrypted drives, and uploaded it to a dead drop cloud I'd been maintaining since week 1. Call it paranoia, call it preparation. Either way, it was my insurance. Because now it was official. They were building a narrative, and I was the twist ending they planned to bury in footnotes. They showed up on a Tuesday. No warning, no courtesy call, just a heads up from legal. 4 of them, badges clipped high, expressions already bored but sharp underneath. One carried a wheeled laptop case that clicked like a countdown with every step. They walked straight past reception, straight through the glass doors marked authorized staff only, and posted up in the war room on the 3rd floor. Word spread fast. Audit. Real one. Regulatory. Not internal. By 10:13 a.m., Martin had called a team sync. By 10:17, he was already sweating through his collar. He tried to play it cool, cracking a joke about how many auditors does it take to kill a coffee budget, but no one laughed. Not even the usual bootlickers. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't an exercise. This was the real thing. And for a company like the Beventech, where we handled data for 2 federal agencies and a dozen municipal partners, that meant blood in the water. At 11:20 DAO, they made their first request, the most recent finalized compliance policy and the change log history. 10 minutes later, external vendor contract records tied to a supply chain partner in the Southwest region. That was the one. The breach we'd all heard whispers about. A vendor we'd onboarded under accelerated pre-clearance at Martin's insistence. I'd flagged that file 6 weeks ago, noting the lack of data encryption clause and the mismatch in jurisdictional language. Martin called my concerns theoretical and filed it anyway. By noon, I saw him, the lead auditor, furrow his brow while reading something on screen. He turned to his associate and pointed at a section header, then another. Their eyes narrowed. Clause formatting. That was the tell, because my version had used updated structure in line with the 2024 Fed guides. Martin's hadn't. His kept the clunky pre-2021 numbering system with inconsistent indentations, and there it was, the inconsistency they'd sniffed out. They weren't just reviewing, they were comparing. At 1:04 p.m., I got the message. E. Alvarez, please report to room 3B. No sender, just system issued. I stood up slowly, grabbed my notebook, slipped my badge into my back pocket, and walked down the hall. Martin was already in the room, leaning against the wall like some overworked consultant, trying hard to look unbothered. I sat down across from him. The 2 auditors sat to my right. One of them had my original draft open on a screen. The file name was still there. Internal Rev Policy E. Alvarez Draft. And then Martin did it. Smiled that smug, too-practiced smile and said, "Let's keep this simple, yeah? Just tell them you helped draft the parts I didn't have time to finish." I didn't blink. I didn't move. I let the silence stretch just long enough for it to get uncomfortable. Then I leaned forward and asked, "Do you want the signed version or the correct one?" Everything stopped. The auditors turned. Martin's mouth parted slightly, like he hadn't anticipated I'd speak. I pulled a single printed sheet from my folder, the clause comparison chart I'd built, just in case. On the top corner, it had a timestamp. Under it, my system ID. I slid it across the table. No one said anything for a long, long moment. Then the auditor clicked his pen and said, "Let's start over. Ms. Alvarez, can you walk us through your version?" And just like that, the room flipped. Martin was no longer the expert. I was. I spread the documents out like a dealer with a royal flush. Clause by clause comparison. Original time-stamped draft. Metadata records. Screenshots of submission logs before they were wiped. And the kicker, Martin's final version with its Frankenstein formatting and 3 blatant violations that would have triggered fines north of 6 figures. The lead auditor didn't say much, but his jaw twitched every time he flipped a page. That was all I needed. Martin tried to spin it, said I'd assisted with early drafts, but didn't understand the nuance of stakeholder prioritization. The man actually used that phrase with a straight face, like it was a TED Talk and not an active compliance investigation. I didn't even look at him. Just kept answering questions like I had nothing to hide, because I didn't. When they asked for supporting evidence, I handed over a printed copy of the Slack thread, where Martin told a team lead I was expendable, then the email where I sent him my draft, complete with a 2-paragraph summary and an explicit line, "Please advise before forwarding to legal for final review." I watched one of the auditors underline that sentence like it was a confession. That's when legal walked in. Not ours, theirs. 3 floors up, big corner office, rarely seen outside of boardrooms. She sat down, skimmed both versions, and asked a single question. Which draft was signed and submitted? Martin shifted in his seat. The silence made the room feel humid. I answered before he could, because I knew he'd lie. His was submitted. Mine was scrubbed. She nodded once and wrote something down. Then she asked to see my export file of the deleted change logs. I pulled out the flash drive from my notebook sleeve and handed it over. That drive had everything. Every version Martin opened, every edit he reversed, every section he deleted with my name still in the comments. She plugged it in without a word. 10 minutes later, a different auditor stepped in, leaned down to my ear, and quietly said, "Ms. Alvarez, we'd like to speak with you privately." Martin opened his mouth to object, but the lead auditor cut him off with a glance that said, "Not now. Not anymore." I stood and followed him out, heartbeat steady, breathing even. We walked past rows of wide-eyed employees pretending not to look. Down the corridor, past Martin's nameplate, still shining like it belonged there, into a conference room I'd never been invited into before. The blinds were already drawn. There was water on the table, a legal pad and a voice recorder. Nothing theatrical, no threat, just procedure. "Sit," the auditor said. He didn't interrogate me, didn't ask for dirt. He asked for truth. So I gave it. The timeline, the revision history, the early red flags, the breach, the moment I knew they were prepping a fall guy, him saying I was expendable. He nodded slowly throughout, only stopping me once. "When you wrote your version, were you aware of the upcoming vendor regulation changes?" "Yes," I said. I'd flagged them twice in the internal digest. No one responded. He made a small sound in his throat. Something like disgust, or maybe resignation. When I finished, he turned off the recorder and leaned back in his chair. "You realize," he said, "if your version had been submitted, none of this would have triggered an audit." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. He already knew. By the time I returned to my desk, Martin's voice was already echoing down the hall, frantic, too loud, too performative. "We've always had a collaborative process. I didn't know there were discrepancies." You could practically hear the flailing. A man trying to control a narrative while the floorboards caved in under his shoes. HR posted a notice less than an hour later. Mandatory interviews, compliance staff only. Private calendar invites followed. No context. Just blocks of time marked in red. I got the 3:15 slot. When I walked into the room, I found HR, legal, and someone new, an executive assistant from the board, eyes sharp and quiet, tapping notes directly into a tablet like a courtroom stenographer. They asked me to recount my involvement with the policy revisions. I didn't dramatize it, just laid out the steps. My draft, the citation structure, the update logs, the policy standards I followed. I named every regulation I incorporated, quoted 2 of them from memory. I watched one of them glance down at her binder like she was double-checking me. She didn't have to. I was right. Then came the quiet moment that shifted the energy. The legal rep leaned in and said, "Our current file version doesn't name you in the authorship logs. Are you certain yours was the source material?" "I'm sure," I replied. But don't take my word for it. Check the metadata. There was a pause, just long enough to feel like someone had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. The exec assistant typed something into her tablet. A few minutes later, a ping hit the room's shared screen. The file opened. Internal Rev Final v2.pdf Properties tab. Author E. Alvarez, embedded timestamp from 4 days before Martin's submission. Silence. Legal cleared his throat. That wasn't reflected in the version submitted to regulators. No, I said, because Martin exported my draft, altered it, and re-uploaded it under his login. He must not have realized the metadata didn't wipe when he saved the PDF locally. The exec assistant's pen stopped moving. She looked at me like I was speaking a language no one else in the room had ever learned. Within 30 minutes, IT confirmed the version history. They mapped the digital trail from my original upload through a series of backdated edits under Martin's credentials. Every scrubbed comment, every deleted line, all still logged, just buried behind internal flags he assumed no one would ever check. By 5:02 p.m., I got a forwarded message from someone in Ops. A board member had emailed legal directly. Subject: Urgent. Who authorized the current version? No one replied all. At 6:17 p.m., Martin was seen walking out of the building with a manila envelope under his arm. Not a word, not even a glance toward the floor he used to run. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak. I kept typing. That's what rattled them most, I think. I never raised my voice, never demanded credit, just answered every question with clean lines and irrefutable facts. Because when the truth is sharp enough, you don't need to twist it. You just hand it over and let it cut on its own. The debrief room smelled like burnt coffee and fear. Cheap overhead lights buzzed above us, and no one dared shift in their seat too loudly. The regulators had returned, this time with more bodies and sharper questions. Legal was present. HR too. And Martin, sitting 2 chairs away from me, looked like a man rehearsing denial in real time. Eyes darting, fingers twitching, knee bouncing like it had a secret. It all came down to a single page. The lead auditor laid it flat on the table. The final compliance policy submission. The one Beventech had proudly logged to the Federal Registry. Highlighted clause inconsistencies. Mismatched language referencing repealed provisions. One item literally copy-pasted from a framework retired in 2019. Then came the question, who signed this revision? The room froze. Martin's lips parted, but no sound came out. Just the wheeze of a man realizing he'd bet everything on everyone else being dumber than him. He cleared his throat. The version was compiled with input from... The auditor cut him off. Who signed it? Martin looked at legal. Legal looked at me, and I didn't hesitate. I did, I said, but not the one you reviewed. I reached into my folder and pulled out a printed copy, stapled, time-stamped, clause-indexed, and statute referenced. The cover page had my full name and system ID. I slid it across the table like a chess piece landing on check. This is the original version, authored, signed, and submitted internally 4 days before that one was filed under Mr. Vexler's login. It was later deleted from our archive. I retained my copy. The room didn't move for a breath. Then one of the regulators picked it up and flipped straight to section 6.2, the one Martin had butchered. She ran a finger along the paragraph and nodded once. This would have passed. Those 4 words cut sharper than anything I could have said. They weren't angry. They weren't disappointed. They were just fact. Cold. Clinical. Devastating. Across the table, Martin sank back into his chair like gravity had finally remembered him. The auditors conferred for no more than 3 minutes. When they returned, the tone had changed. No more pretense, no more small talk. They began asking pointed follow-up questions, not to me, but to legal. Who reviewed the internal document trail? Why wasn't the metadata discrepancy flagged prior to submission? Was the deletion of prior drafts sanctioned? The answers were all variations of, we'll need to verify that. Martin didn't speak again, not even when the lead auditor turned to him and said flatly, until this is resolved, your access credentials are to be suspended pending further review, effective immediately. He blinked. Wait, you're suspending me? Legal just stood up and started collecting papers. No ceremony, no defense, just the quiet end of a man who thought erasing someone else's work would make it his own. I watched him go. No expression, no satisfaction, just clarity. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about the integrity he tried to bury and the signature he forgot to steal. The apology went out on company letterhead, 2 full pages of polished regret and commitment to excellence boilerplate. But if you knew where to look, the message was clear. In paragraph 3, we acknowledge discrepancies in our internal policy revision process. In paragraph 4, we are reviewing procedures to ensure that all employee contributions are accurately reflected. And in the final line, we thank those individuals whose diligence maintained our compliance posture during this review. They didn't name me, but they didn't need to. The next morning, my badge pinged access to a folder I'd never seen before. Policy Council, internal drafts. It wasn't just some shared drive, it was the inner circle. The people who actually wrote the frameworks behind Beventech's public face. Up until now, that council had been stacked with legacy directors and senior council types, people with polished voices and sanitized emails, people like Martin. Now there was a new name on the invite list. E. Alvarez. No announcement, no welcome message, just quiet access. A few minutes later, a message landed in my inbox from one of the directors I'd only ever seen in passing, a man who'd once ignored me entirely in a compliance briefing, too busy checking his watch. Subject: thank you. Body: your work saved us. If you ever want a seat at the next drafting session, it's yours. That was it. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the message, reread it twice, then flagged it under a folder I'd created months ago when all of this started. I'd named the folder Contingencies. Now it felt more like closure. HR sent out an email later that afternoon, too. Subject: Organizational Realignment, Q3 Updates. I skimmed the list of name changes and title shifts. 3 directors reassigned. 1 VP transitioned to an advisory role. And Martin Wexler? Nowhere. His name didn't appear at all. Not in transitions, not in acknowledgements, not in the system directory when I quietly searched it an hour later. Just gone. Like a corrupted file that someone finally had the guts to delete. And no one said a word. No announcement. No farewell party. No LinkedIn post with the classic "on to new adventures" caption. Just silence. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't walk taller. If anything, the weight of it sat heavier now, because I hadn't wanted him ruined. I just wanted the policy fixed, the system to do what it promised. All those quiet nights rewriting frameworks and chasing citation links. I wasn't doing it for recognition. I did it because the rules should matter, because people downstream of this mess, our vendors, our partners, the government agencies trusting us to handle their data, they didn't get a do-over when things went wrong. And if I'd stayed silent, we'd be facing fines, lawsuits, maybe even blacklisting. So no. I didn't smile when I saw Martin's name missing, but I did open the new draft document folder, and I started writing again. It showed up just past midnight like all the most important documents do, quietly, with no announcement, no confetti, no mass email blast. Just a new entry in the internal policy system, tucked between quarterly templates and a renamed archive folder. File name: Compliance. Rev 2025. Core. Final. E. Alvarez. PDF, I clicked it open. Page 1. Clean formatting. Modern structure. Every clause hyperlinked to its governing statute. Every section layered with cross-reference jurisdiction. Glossary embedded. Definitions aligned with the latest federal lexicon. Footer. Authored by E. Alvarez. No red lines, no edits, no supervised by tags. Just my name. They didn't ask for a presentation. Didn't demand a justification memo. When the meeting invite hit my calendar, subject: Policy Council Board Integration Review, I thought maybe they just wanted to clarify formatting. Maybe I was there to hand off the final version to someone with a better title and a bigger voice. Instead, when I walked in, the general counsel stood up. 2 board members sat across the table. No laptops, no coffee, just folders stacked neatly in front of them. The room was the kind that swallows sound. Glass walls, high ceilings, that too still air that lets you hear your own breathing if you're not careful. Ms. Alvarez, one of them said. Thank you for joining us. They didn't review the draft. They already had. Didn't challenge a single line. They didn't need to. They slid something across the table. It was a badge. Heavy, not plastic. Metal core, white background, Beventech seal in the corner. Below the company name, it read, E. Alvarez Policy and Integrity Lead. Advisor to board, no acting, no interim, no prefix to soften it. I stared at it for a second longer than I should have, long enough that the silence might have felt awkward. But no one rushed me. No one filled the space because this time I wasn't the one being questioned. I was the answer. I reached forward, picked it up, clipped it to my jacket, and sat back. They moved on to the next agenda item, vendor transparency audit protocols. Like this was just a normal Tuesday. Like I'd always belonged at that table. And maybe I had. The same woman who used to organize folders no one read, who got told to stay in her scope, who had her work erased and rewritten by a man whose gut instinct couldn't outsmart a metadata log, now sat beside the people writing the future of this company's compliance. And I didn't raise my voice to get here. I just didn't let them bury the truth. Too young to understand policy. Maybe, but not too young to fix it.
Bye-bye.